Ogunsowo. Let's look at the issue of the flow of funds. I tried to ask it earlier on, but I didn't get the answers that I think we need to hear. The flow of funds, there's been this inadequate flow of funds, according to some reports, into the Federation accounts. What's your take on this?
Again, the flow of funds will only happen if there's money in the Federation account, clearly. There are other issues that are more tactical that also affects the flow of funds, with the CBN trying to manage inflation rates, trying to manage money supply. That also affects the flow of funds. The most critical part of the revenue with the budget is we are not making enough money. If we're not making enough money, we would always have issues with how the funds flow.
Now, who says we're not making enough money? Is it the LNPC, which is one of those agencies that, that's actually in charge of revenue, generating revenue from oil sales or receipts, or customs, which also, brings money into the account? Which remits money into the account?
On the revenue basis, like we all know, some 6% of the nation's budget is oil-based. Apart from that, the monies that accrue to the government from corporate income tax, from value-added tax, from customs is less than 3 trillion naira. As of today, for the 2014 budget, the projections for corporate income tax is about 985 billion naira. The projections for value-added tax is about 845 billion naira. Clearly, what this means is that non-oil revenue sources aren't enough to take us to the promised land. We don't know, we'll always have that discussion on revenue allocation, whereby after monies come into the Federation account, 57% goes to the federal government, about 23% comes to the states, and the balance goes to the local governments. The discussion on revenue sharing will reduce when we start making money. So we could always have a classical discussion of which would you prefer as a state government? Would you prefer to have 27, or would you prefer to have 23% of 100 naira, or would you prefer to have 10% of 1,000 naira? The issue of revenue sharing keeps becoming intense because revenue sources are not as high as is required. Again, if you're a sitting governor and you're given two options, currently you earn 23% on all proceeds, excluding excluding the 13% derivation fund that goes to all producing states. You're given an option as a state of getting 23% of 100 naira, or you're given a second option of 10% of 1,000 naira. Clearly, 10% of 1,000 naira is higher than 23% of 100 naira. What this clearly means is that we are having this discussion of revenue sharing because the money is insufficient.
Okay, let's look at.
I want to say something. I think that I have issues with revenue inflow. Look, budget was prepared on a benchmark of $79 per barrel. Oil had sold throughout the year above the $100 mark. And so, what are the issues? Collection? I think we should ask those questions, and that's why you find that the governors have been shouting blue murder and saying, "Look, where's our money? What's happening? Money from the professional account is not getting to us, and so on and so forth." And now, what should happen is that, for instance, we should be looking at non-oil revenue sources. We're talking about diversifying the economic base of this country. Ideally, the sources, non-oil sources, should fund recurrent expenditure. Ideally, and so that because oil is a wasting asset. So you want to use oil, to make sure that you put investments on ground that, in terms of intergenerational equity, those who are coming after us, that we don't waste this asset. Asset is wasting. And so when they come and this oil is exhausted, and other sources, other things that we put on ground, other investments, now be able to generate money.
Okay, let's look at the issue of the bureaucracy that is usually tied to budget approval. Okay, you were trying to say earlier on that before a ministry or department can get its budget approved, you have to come for some hearing, you have to come and defend it and all of that. does this also contribute to the poor, the supposedly poor budget implementation?
I think that really, if you look at it logically, the budget goes to the National Assembly from the budget office. And then before the budget office sends to you a collated budget of the Federation, they send it to you. And that means that before they did that, there was some harmonization, but then they have to do, to take a best eye view of the economy and say, look, this is what you want to present. Now you present this to the legislature. The legislature in its turn goes back and begins to call these departments and agencies to come and defend their budget. And it's on record, we've heard, that they go there to defend their budgets and they try to play games to see that their budget allocation is increased. And in the process, you are building a distortion to the entire budget. And so if you find that the thing is, it goes out of kilter. And so we have issues. That's why we have issues going forward and backwards. Ideally, I think that if the budget office send it into the National Assembly, if they have issues with it, they should also call back budget office. Okay.
But actually, the issue of having to overhaul the system, we heard the Director General of the SCCI talking about that the whole budgeting process should be overhauled. What's your view about this?
It's the narrative is that's the most essential thing we need. It's more compelling, especially when the legislators keep discussing the budgets from the perspective of budget implementation. The global standards is to discuss the budgeting based on the impact of the budget, not just the implementation of the budget. At certain instances, you could have a fully implemented budget that created little or no impact. We take an example in a recent case in 2009, where we had let's say 2008, where the revenue that accrued to the government from oil was about 6.5 trillion naira. In 2008, our unemployment figures, the official unemployment figures, stood at 9 million. When oil revenue declined in 2009 to the government, where it declined up to 3.1 trillion, unemployment increased to 12 million. That's the impact that we should be looking at. As long as we keep discussing budget implementation, which in essence is how much of what we had projected have we spent, we would lose sight of how is the budget impacting the lives of Nigerians.
Okay.